JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has been one of the most popular anime within the past decade. Its rise to popularity and longevity, despite its, for the lack of a better term, bizarreness, is truly a testament to the writing of its author Hirohiko Araki's genius. But it wasn't always like this. As the different parts have progressed, we can see Araki's penmanship improving through the decades, and in no character do I believe this is better exemplified than the sworn enemy of the Joestar bloodline, Dio Brando himself. So in today's video, I want to explore the improvements in Araki's writing by looking at Dio through the three different parts where he actually appears, then how what he learned was applied to the different stories overall and how they impacted them, right? So with all the preamble out the way, as usual, thank you guys for the support. Love you. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. It's free and it doesn't hurt anybody, and it does help the channel. Now, let's get it done. Dio being a recurring character throughout pretty much all of JoJo's is probably the best thing Araki could have done for the story, because it not only establishes a character across all 6 parts, even if he himself does not directly appear in that part, but he is something of a glue that influences and brings everything together in such a way that the closest that we ever really get to this with a Joestar is Joseph. And while I do understand that Jotaro does appear over the course of more parts than Joseph, because Joseph is only parts 2, 3, and 4, while Jotaro is 3, 4, 5, and 6. But Jotaro is not really that influential in 5, and he's kind of out of the fight for a long while in 6, while he is influential because it's literally based on his daughter, and he's a pretty prominent character in there, and also very prominent in part 4. But Joseph, I feel as though every part that he's in, he has something of a pretty important role. Part 2, main character. Part 3, mentor, and he's very active in there. Part 4, he's Josuke's dad, and while he is old and, you know, has dementia and all that kind of stuff, he does also take care of the invisible baby and things like that. So I feel like Joseph is more proactive than Jotaro is, at least if we're comparing it to part 5, but I'm not gonna hold that against him, right? But seeing him across all these parts though shows not just how his character evolves, but how Araki's writing decisions change. Because if you look at JoJo's from an outside perspective, parts 1, 3, and 6 where Dio appears, he should not change as much as he does, because part 1 and 3 Dio is, I'm not gonna say completely, but he's very much a jarringly different character than what we get of him in part 6, right? And Dio throughout the entire series is always a very self-centered and narcissistic man, but this was his only real character trait in part 1, other than I guess being just evil, but I feel like those go hand in hand, right? He only cares about himself, and his main aspiration in life is to become filthy rich, which today's climate, I get it, man. I kind of get that part, right? But his vampiric powers exemplify this. Dio does not have or want to offer anything to the world. He only seeks to take for himself whatever he sees fit. And that's why his powers are such a reflection of his character, and they fit him quite well. And also just vampires, because vampires, you know, they're pretty charming and things like that. And Dio, he's a charming guy, right? Because even though he is very charismatic and, again, a charming man, oftentimes he takes whatever he wants, right? He's referred to as this ethereally beautiful being, and this is not his primary way of gathering allies, which, you know, being charming and charismatic, at least not yet in part 1, right? He seeks to dominate and subjugate people through his powers, turning them into zombies through the flesh buds that he uses in parts 1 and 3. Actually, I don't remember if he used flesh buds in part 1. I'm actually not 100% sure on that, but the flesh buds, they put people in this euphoric state, and this causes them to be easily brainwashed and willing to do whatever Dio wants. And moving on to what I'm pretty sure everyone would call Dio's most impactful role and most prominent role is in part 3 during the Stardust Crusaders. Here we see our first progression of Dio's character, which makes sense. He spent 100 years at the bottom of the ocean on his own, so he had nothing but time to himself to think, right? And with the introduction of stands, we once again see Dio's character growth and change of goal reflected in his abilities, right? Because with his stand, which is heavy-handedly named The World, or Zawaldo, however you want to pronounce it, we are clued into Dio's goals and ambitions. He seeks to not only dominate the world, but to control it at a fundamental level. Time is the most crucial thing in the world, and through his stand ability, Dio has gained the ability to not only stop it, but to move through it while it's stopped, right? He has outgrown the idea of riches, which is kind of ironic because he has gained it by this point. He's gained the cult following and the riches that he wants, right? He seeks to destroy the Joestars once and for all and take over the world, right? And during this time, Dio becomes something of, again, a cult leader. He didn't use his flesh buds on stand users to control them the same that he did before in part 1, right? He uses his charisma, charm, and power to have them either worship him or fear him, right? A few characters, I will admit, were controlled, but it mostly seemed like a way for Araki to bring additional stand users to Jotaro's side without him having to go about, you know, finding them himself, right? And the changes to Dio's character between parts 1 and 3 are honestly negligible because overall he remains the same for the most part. He's still selfish and narcissistic and just wants what he wants and all that kind of stuff, right? Part 6, however, does a lot of retroactive work for Dio's character because, again, by this point, he is dead. And the most jarring thing is that Dio actually makes a friend in Enrico Pucci, right? While, yes, in the past, Dio has shown respect for people he sees as strong or somewhat relative equals to him, because I don't think Dio really sees anybody as his equal. The prime example being Jonathan, which is why he took Jonathan's body. But here we see him not only confiding his plans to Pucci, but also sitting, reading, and discussing how they think about different things, right? They speak about philosophy. It is the closest thing we have seen to Dio actually trusting and caring for another person. And I don't remember if you remember correctly, but the heaven plan requires you to have a true friend, which is Pucci for Dio. So much so that Dio leaves a piece of himself with Pucci and entrusts that if he were to die, Pucci would be the one to complete the heaven plan, right? And we've also learned that he got an appreciation for art and music, you know, with him being a huge Michael Jackson fan, which, how could you not, to be honest? If Dio were to ever say somebody's better than him, I do think it would be Michael Jackson, if we're just keeping it a band right there. But Araki at the beginning of JoJo's wrote Dio as a very linear character who had nothing but evil intentions. And by the time we get to part 6, his goals are entirely different. Even though, yes, the main point of the heaven plan was to help Dio conquer fate and be seen as a god, he also thought that this would provide humanity with peace by allowing them to know their own fate and accept it, which causes them to reach enlightenment. So by the time we get to the end of part 6, Araki goes on to write what many of us consider his magnum opus and the best part of JoJo's in Steel Ball Run. Here we get to see all the things Araki has learned about character writing from his time spent writing Dio over the now years and decades, because what, 87 is when he started. He wrote all the way into the 90s. Stone Ocean started in 1999 and ended in 03. So that's 3 different decades, 2 different centuries of Araki's writing, which is crazy. And pause. Netflix, Steel Ball Run, don't fumble it the same way you did Stone Ocean. Don't do that. Johnny deserves better. Jolene deserved better. You don't get to do what JJK did and drop it in 2 parts. You drop that shit weekly all the way through till it's finished. You've lost the privilege to split shit up. But gone is the idea that the main character is absolutely good within the story for the most part, you know, because while yes, the Joestars do all have their own quirks and flaws, except for Jonathan. I guess the only flaw of Jonathan is that he's too trusting, and that's why Dio was able to get away with whatever the fuck he got away with, stealing his body. And all the other Joestars are the source of good within the story, you know, even if they do have their, again, flaws with Joseph, with his play cowardice and his kind of laid back, laissez-faire attitude. Jotaro, his demeanor, not making friends. Josuke with his hair and getting angry about that. Giorno, I think Giorno is the only real Joestar with what I'd consider a real flaw, and that is probably due to him being Dio's son, and it's that his greed and his ambition does supersede all else, right? But with Johnny Joestar, however, this is gone. He doesn't start the story as some upstanding member of society, and he doesn't necessarily end the story as one either. His goals throughout the entire story are purely selfish. His motivation is selfish. He lost his ability to walk because he badmouthed the wrong person, leading him to get shot in the back, which deserved because, you know, escalation. Definitely for sure escalation. Don't shoot people in the back because they insult you. But he was a dickhead and people didn't like him. So, you know, the entire reason for participating in the Steel Ball Run from Johnny's perspective was selfish. He wants to learn the spin from Gyro because it allowed him to walk and feel his legs again. And again, acquiring the corpse parts was a selfish endeavor for him because simply he just wanted to walk again, which, you know, I don't think that's a crazy ask. But at first, Johnny's entire reason for the corpse parts is because they allowed him to use his stand, the Tusk, which crazy stand. If you know what Tusk does and how it evolves, crazy fucking stand, right? But he does not start as some hero, and he doesn't care to be one either. The entire reason he even opposes Funny Valentine is that he sees him as a threat to his friends and competition for the corpse parts, because even though, yes, he learns lessons along the way that open his mind to seeing other different point of views and becomes a better person, objectively speaking, he does not care for who is wrong or right, because he himself does say this, that Johnny doesn't care about that. And Johnny serves as Araki's do-over for the flat character that is Jonathan Joestar. But to me, he shows many qualities that are very much akin to an evolved version of Dio. And while we do have Dio Brando, you know, he's this version's world of Dio, and we actually have two of them. But in terms of development and complexity, I'd say Johnny is more analogous to our Dio from the original universe, right? And it shows what Araki has learned, because coincidentally, in an alternate universe, these two were more alike than they would, you know, like to think in Jonathan and Dio, right? And JoJo's is genuinely one of my favorite anime out there. I love it. The idea of switching not only protagonists and not only a power system, but the universe itself shows just how much of a genius and how confident Araki is in his writing style. Many mangakas don't even get the chance to grow in their own singular story, but to watch his penmanship improve over the course of almost 40 years is truly something to behold. There is some irony to Dio being the example for this video, I will admit, because it is exactly something that he himself would expect. Dio thinks he's the perfect being, so why wouldn't he be the topic of discussion for a JoJo's video? You know, someone makes a JoJo's video, and it's not about any of the 6 Joestars that we've seen in that universe that Dio inhabited. It's about Dio himself. But that's the video. You know, as usual, if you guys enjoyed, please consider leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing. You know, we still got that goal of 1,300 subs. Trying to hit that by the end of the month. You know, we got 70 more to go. We at 1230 right now. And let me know your thoughts down below in the, you know, in the comments. I, again, love reading all your comments. I respond to every single one. I know, even if you don't believe it, I do. But I love you guys. Goodbye.